The Galactic Union had always prided itself on civility. Across 10,000 worlds, order was maintained not through blood, but through treaties, councils, and quiet diplomacy. Wars were things of the past, ugly remnants of a primitive age, until the Crag arrived. No one remembered where the Crag came from. Some said they were birthed from dying stars, a species bred in the radiation storms of dead systems. Others whispered that they were what happened when evolution chose hate as its only weapon. What mattered was that when they came, they didn't negotiate, didn't conquer. They consumed. Entire planets stripped to silence, cities turned to dust, oceans boiled for fuel. The Galactic Union's armies were scholars and peacekeepers, not warriors. The first defense fleets crumbled in weeks. By the time the Crag reached the Union's inner worlds, panic had replaced order. Worlds burned faster than they could be evacuated. Every council broadcast the same desperate plea across the void. Send soldiers. Send anyone who can fight. And somewhere beyond the edge of Union space, an old relay blinked to life, one that had been silent for centuries. The message traveled across dead frequencies, through the ruins of forgotten satellites, until it reached a small, isolated system orbiting a yellow star. Earth. The answer came back 3 days later. It wasn't long. It wasn't polite. It was a single packet of data, encrypted in a language no alien translator could fully understand. But when the Union decoded it, the message was clear enough. We're coming. At first, the Union laughed. Earth was a myth to most, a quarantined world, classified as a death world centuries ago. Its gravity was crushing, its atmosphere volatile, its wildlife murderous. No civilized being had ever set foot there and lived. The humans had chosen isolation, sealing themselves away behind quarantine walls and refusing to join the galactic order. But 3 months after that short message, the laughter stopped. They came in black ships, hulking things built from steel and fury, their hulls scarred and unadorned. No banners, no insignias, only the deep gray of gunmetal and the pulse of engines that sounded like thunder. The first human carrier, TSS Resolute, entered orbit above the Union capital of Valaris Prime, and the world beneath trembled. The aliens gathered to witness their arrival. Delicate, crystalline diplomats and scaled officers stood along the landing bays, waiting for soldiers. What stepped out instead were beasts. The first human squad descended the ramp in armored exosuits, plating so thick it looked more like tanks than uniforms. The aliens expected towering giants, but humans were short by galactic standards. Compact, dense, every movement controlled. Their armor was painted with scratches instead of metals. Their helmets were scarred. And when they moved like predators. General Kethan of the Union's Defense Council tried to greet them. "Welcome to Valaris Prime," he began, his voice uncertain. "We are honored to have the warriors of Earth with us in this time of need." The leading human removed her helmet. Her skin was dark, her hair cropped close, her eyes cold steel. "Name's Commander Reza," she said. "We're not here for honor. Where's the fight?" The aliens blinked in confusion. "We'll need to brief you on the—" But Reza had already turned to her soldiers. "Gear check, ammo calibration. We drop in 6 hours." One of the alien aides, a feathered scholar from Varnus IV, whispered nervously, "Are they trained for this kind of warfare?" Kethan's voice faltered. "They volunteered." The humans didn't look like volunteers. They looked like survivors. Each one carried scars, some on their faces, some in their eyes. They spoke little, but every motion was efficient, practiced. When the alien engineers tried to refit their weapons for Union compatibility, the humans refused. "Ours work fine," one of them said, cleaning a weapon the size of a small cannon. 6 hours later, they launched toward the front line. The battlefield was a moon called Jora 10, a mining colony turned slaughterhouse. The Crag had infested it, spreading through tunnels and tearing through steel like paper. The Union troops that had been stationed there were long gone. What was left of them floated in the void, burned and broken. The human drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, plasma shielding glowing red-hot. The crag watched from below, towering creatures of bone and chitin, their limbs bristling with spines, their mouths glowing with internal fire. They waited, claws digging into the ground. Then the pods hit. There was no slow deployment, no careful positioning. The humans landed hard enough to crack the moon's crust. Doors blew open. Fire poured out. And from the smoke, the Deathworlders emerged. The first wave of crag rushed them, hundreds strong. The aliens expected the humans to retreat, to regroup. Instead, the Deathworlders advanced. Their exosuits weren't designed for defense. They were built for offense. Gauntlets became pile drivers, rifles became flamethrowers. Every step was a roar, every shot a thunderclap. A crag warrior, a creature that had slain 50 Union soldiers in a single charge, leapt toward Reza. She sidestepped, grabbed one of its arms and tore it clean off. "You wanted soldiers," she muttered into her comms. "You got us instead." Above the battlefield, the Union observers watched in stunned silence. The feeds showed chaos, smoke, and death. But beneath it all, the humans moved with terrifying precision. They didn't form traditional lines. They hunted. Small squads moved through the tunnels, using motion sensors and heartbeat trackers to locate the crag. When they found them, they didn't call for artillery. They went in themselves. By dawn, the surface of Jora 10 was quiet. The crag were gone. The moon was littered with their corpses, their acid blood soaking the dust. When the first alien command ship landed, General Kethan expected to see devastation, to find the human troops wounded, scattered. Instead, he found them resting near their drop pods, helmets off, sharing ration packs and crude jokes. "You eradicated an entire swarm?" Kethan asked in disbelief. How did you even—" Reza looked up from where she was cleaning her weapon. "We adapt," she said simply. The general stared. "You suffered losses, surely?" Reza's expression didn't change. "3 dead. 1 injured." Kethan almost couldn't speak. "3?" One of her soldiers chuckled darkly. "Guess we're getting soft." From that day on, the galaxy learned a new word. It wasn't soldier. It wasn't hero. It was Deathworlder. The humans didn't sleep much. They didn't waste time with ceremony. They fought, rebuilt, and fought again. On every front the crag invaded. The humans followed. Their ships didn't carry flags. They carried warnings. When a crag hive detected Terran ships entering orbit, some tried to flee. None succeeded. In the months that followed, Reza's name became legend. Entire battalions of aliens joined under human command, learning tactics that defied logic, flanking maneuvers that bordered on suicidal, feints so reckless they only worked because humans were willing to risk everything. And as the crag adapted, so did humanity. On the frozen world of Myr, they fought in temperatures that froze plasma mid-flight. On the volcanic plains of Drask, they used magma vents as ambush points. When orbital bombardments failed, they fought underground, dragging the crag into the dark and killing them by hand. The Union Council began to fear them almost as much as the enemy. The Deathworlders didn't obey the same codes. They didn't wait for orders. When a command post hesitated, the humans moved anyway. When the Council wanted to retreat, Reza ignored the command entirely. "You don't win wars by running," she told them. By the time the crag reached the Union's last bastion, a fortress world called Nithos Prime, the name Earth had become a war cry. Union soldiers painted it on their armor. Civilians whispered it like a prayer. And somewhere in the endless dark, as the last crag fleet gathered, Commander Reza stood on the deck of the Resolute, watching the enemy fill the stars. She didn't speak. Didn't need to. Behind her, 1,000 Deathworlders checked their weapons in silence. They hadn't come for glory. They'd come to end the war. The skies above Nithos Prime looked like the end of creation. Thousands of crag warships burned against the stars, their chitinous hulls pulsing with crimson light as they poured into orbit. From the surface, the entire horizon shimmered with the reflection of their approach. An armada so vast that the Union's last defensive grid trembled under its own calculations. The Council called it hopeless. The civilians called it Judgment Day. Commander Reza didn't call it anything. She stood on the command bridge of the Resolute, eyes fixed on the holomap as red icons multiplied by the second. Her jaw was locked, her voice steady. "They've committed everything," she said. "Good. So do we." The Resolute was one of 20 Terran warships now orbiting Nethos Prime. Ships built not for elegance, but endurance. Their armor plating could shrug off hits that would shatter Union cruisers. Their weapons were brutal and efficient. Rail cannons that could tear through asteroids, nuclear warheads without hesitation. Around them, the rest of the Union fleet maneuvered nervously, their captains whispering doubts through encrypted channels. General Kethen appeared on the main screen, his face pale under the flickering light. "Commander Reza, the Krag fleet outnumbers us 50 to 1. Our intelligence suggests they've seeded the upper orbit with spore mines. If we engage directly—" "We don't engage directly," Reza interrupted. "We draw them in. We make them come to us." Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Voss, a scarred man with a voice like gravel, gave a sharp nod. "Deploy the drones. Phase 2 formation." Outside, thousands of Terran combat drones launched in synchronized waves, each a small, self-guided missile armed with nothing more than shrapnel and determination. They didn't fight to win space battles. They fought to make space battles impossible. They moved in unpredictable arcs, colliding with enemy fighters, disrupting targeting systems, jamming comms. The Krag advance slowed, snarling the neat formations of their assault into chaos. "Deathworlder tactics," one alien officer muttered in awe aboard a nearby Union ship. "They're turning space into a jungle." Reza smirked faintly when the comms caught the phrase. "Damn right," she said. As the Krag fleet hesitated, the Terran ships descended through the atmosphere, breaking apart into smaller strike groups. Each carrier dropped thousands of shock pods, their hulls blazing like falling meteors. The Union's planetary defenses, long idle, reactivated in response, massive plasma cannons and rail turrets roaring to life. The night side of Nethos Prime became a storm of fire. Down below, Union ground troops watched the sky ignite. Captain Lyra, the same feathered Varnian who had once doubted the humans on Vega Prime, was among them. Her claws tightened around her rifle as she saw the incoming pods. "They're actually landing," she whispered. "They're going to fight them on the ground." Her sergeant, a young insectoid from the Thren system, shivered. "But the Krag outnumber them 1,000 to 1. Lyra's eyes followed the streaks of fire across the clouds. "They don't care." The first wave hit like a meteor shower. The humans emerged before the dust even cleared. Exosuits sealed, visors glowing in the dim light. They didn't waste time with strategy briefings or rallying speeches. They simply advanced. The Krag were already waiting. Miles of flesh and armor, black towers of bone jutting from their hides. Their roars shook the mountains. They fired acidic plasma in sweeping arcs that melted entire fortifications. Union soldiers broke and ran. The humans didn't. Reza led from the front, wielding a heavy rail rifle that kicked like a thunderclap. Each shot tore through multiple enemies, sending bursts of molten ichor into the air. "Voss, push the left flank. Don't let them encircle the ridgeline." Voss's voice came through the comms, harsh and calm. "Already ahead of you." Further along the ridge, human engineers were driving spikes into the ground. Portable seismic charges meant to destabilize terrain. Within minutes, the charges detonated, turning solid rock into a collapsing wave. The Krag formation stumbled, crushed under their own mass. Reza's troops didn't cheer. They didn't stop. They moved in silence, efficient as predators. From her vantage point, Lyra watched it all unfold through binoculars. The Deathworlders fought like no army she had ever seen. They didn't fight with fear or rage. They fought without it. Every human seemed to know instinctively where to move, when to shoot, when to risk everything. They didn't need orders because every one of them was trained for extinction-level combat. The Krag began to adapt. Their rear ranks split open, birthing smaller, faster predators, nightmare creatures designed for speed and agility. They darted between human lines, slashing with blade-like limbs. One of Reza's squads was surrounded, their exosuits cracking under the assault. "Squad Delta, fall back," Voss barked. "Negative," came the reply, a woman's voice steady through the chaos. "We hold!" Lyra watched in disbelief as the humans triggered their last charges, detonating themselves along with the swarm. The shockwave tore a crater in the battlefield. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained but twisted wreckage and silence. "Delta's gone," Voss said softly. Reza's voice came back cold. "They did their job." Overhead, the crag's orbital reinforcements began to descend, dropships bursting through the atmosphere like raining comets. "We're outnumbered 10-1 now," Voss reported. "Good," Reza said. "That means less time wasted looking for targets." She keyed her comms to the Resolute. "Orbital command, this is ground lead. Begin the burn." From orbit, the Terran ships adjusted their positioning, aligning their magnetic accelerators toward the surface. Then they fired. They weren't shooting at the crag ships. They were firing through them. Massive slugs of hyperdense tungsten ripped through the atmosphere, vaporizing anything in their path. Crag vessels shattered mid-descent, raining debris onto their own armies. The blast waves turned valleys into glass. The humans didn't flinch. They marched through the hellfire using the chaos as cover. In the Union Command Center, General Kethen could only stare at the tactical feed. "They're fighting in their own bombardment," he whispered. "They'll die in their own fire." But Lyra knew better. "They live in it," she murmured. As the battle raged, Reza's forces pushed toward the crag command hive, a towering fortress grown from blackened chitin and pulsating energy. The crag overmind within was directing the entire invasion, its psychic tendrils stretching across continents. Destroy the hive and the swarm would collapse. "Target locked," Voss said, his exosuit limping from damage. "We breach on your mark." "Mark," Reza answered. The Deathworlders charged. Plasma bolts streaked through the air. Crag beasts poured from the hive like a living wall. The humans didn't slow. They hit the gates with explosive rounds, tore through the walls with mining charges, and stormed the inner chambers. Inside, the air was thick with spore clouds and heat. The Overmind loomed at the core, a massive pulsating creature wired into the structure itself. Its voice was everywhere, crawling through the air like a whisper. "You fight without logic. You fight knowing death is certain." Reza raised her rifle. "You wanted soldiers," she said. "You got Deathworlders instead." The Overmind struck, tendrils lashing through the chamber. Humans were thrown across the floor. Armor cracked, blood sprayed. But Reza advanced, one step at a time, until she stood before the creature. She pulled the pin on a fusion grenade and jammed it into the Overmind's core. "This is for every world you burned." The explosion ripped through the hive, a sun born in darkness. The ground convulsed, the sky cracked open, and across the planet, the crag forces froze. Deprived of their command link, they turned on one another, shrieking in confusion. When the smoke cleared, Reza lay half-buried under debris, armor smoking. Voss dragged her free, coughing through his cracked helmet. "Overmind's down. The swarm's collapsing." Reza nodded weakly. "Then it's over." But as she looked up at the burning sky, she knew it wasn't. The crag had more than one Overmind. This was just a hive, a single arm of something larger, something worse. Still, for the first time in months, the galaxy had silence. In the aftermath, alien soldiers walked among the ruins, stepping carefully over the bodies of the fallen humans. Lyra found Reza standing on a ridge, watching the dawn. "You've saved us again," Lyra said quietly. Reza didn't answer right away. "No," she said finally. "We just bought time. The beasts of Earth aren't heroes. We're what happens when the galaxy runs out of them." She looked back toward the sky where the crag fleet still lingered at the edge of sensor range. "And until they're all gone, we don't stop." Lyra followed her gaze, seeing only the vast, empty black. "You'll go after them, won't you?" Reza's reply was quiet, almost a whisper. "That's what we do." The battlefield had changed, and so had the humans. By the time the third month of the campaign dawned, the beasts of Earth were no longer a curiosity or a whispered rumor. They were a storm rolling across the stars, reshaping everything in their path. The alien coalition had begun to understand, too late, that when humanity fought, it wasn't for conquest. It was survival, and nothing born of Earth ever lost at that. The planet of Draxos 4 burned beneath a fractured sky. Once a vibrant trade hub, it was now a scar of craters and twisted metal. The Coalition's high command had entrenched their remaining forces there, calling it their last defensive wall. Behind those walls waited thousands of soldiers from 20 worlds, each trained, equipped, and terrified. The humans called it simply the next stop. Captain Reyes led the 7th Earth Regiment through the ash fields. Their exosuits hissed softly with each step, hydraulic limbs moving in perfect rhythm. The armor painted in black and dusted with blood. The HUDs flickered with enemy positions, but the men didn't speak. They didn't need to. Behind them marched their beasts, massive, genetically enhanced companions that had once been animals of Earth's wilderness. Wolves the size of tanks padded silently between the ruins, their metallic eyes reflecting firelight. Raptors, descendants of Earth's eagles, bred for atmospheric combat, circled above, their wings slicing the smoke. The Coalition had never seen such creatures, and never stopped fearing them. As the humans neared the outpost's perimeter, Lieutenant Kale whispered over comms, "Thermal scans show heavy fortifications ahead. Automated cannons, drones, plasma grids. They're ready for us." Reyes's voice was calm, almost bored. "They think they are." The commander raised a hand and the line halted. He looked to his left where a massive gray-furred wolf crouched beside him. "Ghost," he said quietly. "Find the cracks." The creature tilted its head, understanding perfectly. With a low growl, Ghost leapt into the shadows, disappearing into the smoke. A heartbeat later, the comms filled with encrypted signals. The wolves were mapping the enemy's grid, marking weaknesses humans could exploit. When the first explosion came, it wasn't from the humans. The Coalition's outer cannon misfired, struck by its own defense grid. A subtle hack planted minutes earlier by human engineers. Then another cannon fell silent. Then a drone crashed from the sky. The Coalition officers shouted orders, confusion rising. That was when the humans moved. They didn't charge like soldiers. They surged like predators. Silent, precise, unstoppable. Pulse rifles barked, plasma blades cut through armor, and the air filled with the thunder of wolves leaping through fire. Reyes's regiment tore through the line, dismantling defenses one heartbeat at a time. Commander Terran of the Kithian defense watched in disbelief from his command bunker. He'd studied every human tactic, reviewed every data log, and still couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. "They don't fight like soldiers," he muttered. "They hunt." "Sir, they've broken the southern gate," an officer shouted. Terran turned toward the main console, staring at the advancing heat signatures. "No, not broken. Consumed." Outside, Reyes moved through the chaos, directing with hand signals more than words. He saw his people, some bleeding, none hesitating. The wolves dragged away enemy mechs, ripping into armor with steel teeth. A human sniper on the ridge took out officers with mechanical precision. Every movement was measured, every kill deliberate. And then came the sound, the human signal to advance deeper. A long, drawn-out howl. It wasn't animal anymore. It was ritual. Even the aliens who had never heard wolves before froze, something primal tightening their chests. The Coalition's lines collapsed by dawn. Thousands surrendered, more fled into the wastelands. Reyes's regiment didn't chase them. The humans never wasted energy on the broken. They only moved toward the next objective. Hours later, in the aftermath of silence, Reyes stood over the burning remains of Draxos 4's command tower. His armor was cracked, his arm bleeding where shrapnel had bitten deep, but his eyes were sharp, alive. Ghost limped to his side and sat, massive head brushing against the captain's leg. Kale approached, visor cracked, carrying a recovered data core. "Sir, we got their command archives. Locations of the next defensive ring. Looks like they're regrouping at Varaxis Prime." Reyes nodded slowly. "Varaxis Prime. That's their capital line. Do we push now or regroup?" Reyes didn't answer immediately. He looked at the sky where the faint shimmer of Coalition ships was fading into orbit. "We push. They won't have time to recover. Every second we wait, they dig deeper." Sir, Kale said carefully, the men are exhausted. We've lost a quarter already. Reyes glanced back toward the soldiers, bloodied, burned, but standing. Some were tending to the beast's wounds. Others silently repaired armor. None looked ready to stop. They'll move, he said. They always do. Word of Draxos 4 spread through the galaxy faster than light. Coalition worlds whispered about the Earthborn legions, the Death Worlders who fought beside monsters. To some, they were devils. To others, avengers. But all agreed on one thing. The beasts of Earth had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. Meanwhile, in the orbiting fleet above Varaxis Prime, Admiral Kivar of the Coalition stared at the holographic reports in disbelief. They took Draxos 4 with a single regiment, he hissed. 15,000 troops erased. Sir, said one of his aides nervously, they're not troops. They're humans. Kivar slammed a hand against the console. Humans are supposed to be fragile. Their planet's gravity, their diseases, their radiation. They shouldn't even exist. And yet they do, the aide murmured. The admiral turned to his officers. Mobilize the entire fleet. If these creatures reach Varaxis, it's over. No prisoners, no survivors. Burn them all. Down below, Reyes's forces gathered what supplies they could. Draxos 4 was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard. The wolves roamed among the ruins, sniffing for survivors, sometimes finding one and simply sitting nearby until the human medics arrived. Even the beasts had learned restraint. At dusk, as the twin suns fell, a soft melody drifted through the camp. One of the soldiers, a woman named Kira, was playing an old Earth harmonica, the sound haunting and slow. The aliens never understood it. The music humans made after battle, as if mourning and victory were the same thing. Reyes sat by the fire, Ghost's head resting on his knee. We keep moving at dawn, he said softly, though no one had asked. Varaxis Prime, one last wall. Kira stopped playing. And after that? Reyes looked into the fire. Then maybe we stop fighting. But deep down, he knew better. The galaxy had asked for soldiers. What they got instead were the beasts of Earth, creatures who didn't know how to stop once unleashed. And out there, beyond the dark horizon, the next storm was already waiting. In orbit, Admiral Kivar watched the human fleet ignite their engines, moving like a swarm of black wings through space. He leaned forward, whispering to no one, "They're coming." And he was right. Humanity was coming, not as soldiers, but as the answer to every empire that had ever called them weak. The fleet descended on Varaxis Prime like the end of a prophecy. From the upper atmosphere, the human warships blotted out the sun, sleek, dark vessels shaped by necessity, not elegance. They weren't built to inspire awe. They were built to survive the worst the galaxy could throw at them. Below, the capital world of the Coalition shone like a jewel wrapped in fire. Towering spires reached for the clouds, orbital cannons ringed the skies, and 1 billion lives waited beneath the surface, praying that their empire's might would hold. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of the Vigilant, helmet in the crook of his arm, staring at the swirling planet below. He'd seen dozens of worlds burn, but this one was different. Varaxis wasn't a battlefield. It was the heart. Every command ship, every fleet admiral, every high chancellor of the Coalition was somewhere down there. End this battle, and the war would die with them. Lieutenant Kale stepped forward, his armor still scarred from Draxos 4. All regiments report ready, sir. Ground deployment begins on your command. Reyes nodded slowly. Once we drop, communications will be chaos. Stick to the plan. Split into 3 divisions. The 1st and 2nd take the northern defenses. The 3rd moves through the industrial sectors. The beasts lead the charge. Kale hesitated. You think they'll surrender? Reyes almost smiled. They asked for soldiers. They'll get what they asked for. The hangar doors opened with a thunderous roar. Drop pods lined the decks, each carrying a handful of humans and their beasts. The wolves padded into their harnesses without protest. The raptors perched on grav lifts, their talons scraping metal. Reyes stepped into his pod, Ghost beside him, eyes glowing in the dim light. The door sealed, the countdown began, and then they fell. Atmospheric entry was chaos. Flames licked across the pods as they tore through the sky. Coalition anti-air batteries opened up, filling the clouds with streaks of plasma. A dozen pods vanished instantly. The rest twisted through the storm, deploying countermeasures, flares burning like dying stars. Reyes's pod slammed into the ground with bone-jarring force. The door burst open and smoke poured out. The air of Varaxis was thick, heavy with chemical mist and fear. Reyes stepped out, rifle raised, scanning the shattered skyline. The city stretched endlessly. Metal and glass and fire. Ghost leapt from the pod beside him, growling low. Across the horizon, more pods were slamming into the ground, bursting open as human soldiers poured out. Within minutes, the beasts of Earth were on the move again. The first wave hit them almost immediately. Coalition ground forces, mechanized infantry, drones, and skimmer tanks moved in tight formations. Their weapons were precise, their discipline perfect. But none of that mattered when facing humans. Reyes gave the order, and the wolves surged forward. They didn't move in lines, they moved like shadows. Plasma fire scorched the ground around them, but they weaved through it with impossible agility, tearing through armored suits as if they were tin. The humans followed, rifles flashing, blades slicing. It wasn't war. It was nature reclaiming balance. From the command tower at the center of the city, Admiral Kavar watched the chaos unfold on the tactical display. The human advance didn't look like any army he'd ever seen. There was no pattern, no formation, just fluid, unrelenting aggression. "Send the Sky Guards," Kavar barked. "Deploy all drones to Sector 12. Crush them there." Hundreds of drones screamed into the air, filling the skies like a swarm of metallic insects. The coalition soldiers cheered until they saw the raptors. From the smoke, the winged beasts rose, their talons glowing with energy. They dove through the swarm, tearing drones apart mid-air, their screeches cutting through the roar of battle. Some were shot down, but more kept coming. The sky turned into a storm of fire and feathers and metal. On the ground, Kale and his division were pinned near the industrial district. He ducked behind a fallen transport as enemy fire chewed through the walls. "We're outnumbered 5-1, he shouted into comms. "Requesting air support." Reyes's voice came back, calm as ever. "Hold position. Help's on the way." Moments later, the wolves came. A dozen of them burst through a maintenance tunnel, their armored hides reflecting the firelight. They hit the coalition line like an avalanche. The humans followed, turning the tide in seconds. By nightfall, half the city was theirs. The coalition forces had retreated to the central citadel, their last stronghold. The streets ran red with 1,000 kinds of blood. The beasts rested among the rubble, their bodies heaving with exhaustion, but their eyes still burned with purpose. Reyes stood on the rooftop of a shattered skyscraper, watching the fires spread below. Kale joined him, helmet off, face streaked with soot. "They're falling back, but not fast enough. The Citadel's going to be hell." Reyes didn't answer immediately. He was watching something far above, the sky where a massive shadow moved. "That's not their Citadel," he murmured. "That's their flagship." Kale followed his gaze and swore. The coalition dreadnought Vornax was descending through the atmosphere, a kilometer-long fortress bristling with cannons. It wasn't retreating. It was coming down to crush them. "Evacuate?" Kale asked. Reyes shook his head. "We finish this here." The dreadnought opened fire. Plasma lances tore through the city, collapsing entire districts in seconds. The ground shook and the humans scattered for cover. Reyes barked orders through the comms, rallying what forces he could. In the chaos, one of the wolves, a massive black one named Ash, was struck by debris. It fell, howling as its human partner screamed its name. The sound cut through the noise of war. Every human within earshot turned toward the sky, rage igniting behind their eyes. That was the breaking point. "Target the ship's engines," Reyes shouted. "Bring it down." The humans mobilized every heavy weapon they had. Railguns, shoulder cannons, even repurposed enemy mechs, all focused fire on the dreadnought's underbelly. Raptors climbed higher, dodging fire, carrying explosive payloads strapped to their talons. The ship's shields flared under the assault, flickering as human fury pressed harder. Ghost bounded forward, leading a pack of wolves through the ruins, weaving between falling debris. They reached the base of a collapsed tower directly beneath the dreadnought's core thrusters. Reyes followed, loading a high-yield charge onto his rifle. "Ghost," he said quietly. "With me." The wolf growled in reply. They climbed the wreckage together, dodging fire and falling ash until they reached the tower's peak. The dreadnought loomed overhead, its thrusters glowing blue-white. Reyes knelt, taking aim. His visor displayed the weak points, the shield nodes pulsing with energy. "Kale," he said through comms. "When I say go, give me everything you've got." "Yes, sir," Reyes fired. The shot pierced the shield node, and the energy web around the dreadnought faltered for a split second. It was enough. Kale's entire regiment unleashed hell. Explosions tore through the ship's underside, ripping armor apart. The Raptors dove in, their payloads detonating deep within the engine clusters. One by one, the thrusters failed. The dreadnought began to fall. Its descent was slow at first, a groaning, fiery descent that lit up the night sky. Then gravity claimed it fully, and the ship crashed into Varaxis Prime like the wrath of gods. The impact leveled half the city. Silence followed. Reyes lay among the rubble, ears ringing, armor cracked. Ghost limped toward him, one leg mangled but still moving. The captain reached out, resting a hand on the creature's head. Above them, the sky burned orange with the wreckage of the fallen ship. Across the city, the humans began to rise again. Their bodies broken, their spirits unyielding. The beasts stood beside them, bloodied but alive. Reyes looked around at the devastation. "Report!" Kale's voice came through static. "We're still here, sir. Barely." Reyes took a long breath, looking toward the distant citadel, still standing, somehow untouched. "Then it's not over." He pushed himself to his feet, pain flashing behind his eyes. "Rally everyone! We march at dawn." That night, as the fires of Varaxis painted the clouds red, the humans didn't celebrate. They didn't speak of victory or revenge. They tended their wounded, buried their dead, and prepared for the final assault. Because the beasts of Earth had not come for conquest. They had come to end the war, and they would not stop until the galaxy finally understood why their home was called a death world. Dawn rose over the ruins of Varaxis Prime like a dying ember. Smoke still climbed toward the sky where the dreadnought had fallen, its carcass scattered across the city's skeleton. The air tasted of ozone and ash, and beneath it all was silence. The heavy, unnatural silence that comes only after too much killing. The humans didn't rest long. When the light reached their camps, they were already moving. Armor was patched, weapons recalibrated, wounds sealed with biofoam. The wolves limped beside their masters, their eyes glowing faintly through the haze. The raptors perched on the shattered spires above, wings folded, watching the sunrise over a broken empire. Captain Reyes stood at the center of the camp, his armor blackened and scarred, his face drawn but calm. Ghost rested beside him, one leg wrapped in a crude splint, but the wolf's head was high, his breath steady. Around them, what remained of the 7th Regiment gathered in silence. Fewer than half remained, humans and beasts both, but those who stood were enough. Reyes looked over them, the firelight dancing in his eyes. "This is it," he said quietly. "The citadel ahead holds the Coalition's command core. End that, and we end everything." Lieutenant Kale stepped forward, his voice rough. "Scouts report the citadel's shield still active. They've pulled every surviving force inside. Civilians, soldiers, leadership. It's a fortress. Then we crack it," Reyes said simply. The words carried through the ranks like a pulse. No cheering followed. No rallying cries. These weren't men who needed speeches anymore. They just nodded, loaded their weapons, and began to move. The march to the citadel was slow and brutal. The streets were choked with rubble and corpses, alien and human alike. The air shimmered with heat from burning fuel lines, and the ground trembled beneath their boots as distant explosions rippled through what remained of the capital. Along the way, they passed survivors, Coalition civilians too terrified to flee. Some hid behind broken walls, clutching children. Some simply stared at the humans, expecting death. But the beasts of Earth didn't stop for them. A few soldiers left food and water where they could, then moved on without a word. They hadn't come to kill the helpless. They'd come for the ones who started all this. By midday, the citadel was in sight, a towering spire of black metal surrounded by a moat of molten debris. Energy shields flickered around it, pulsing with power. At its peak, banners of the coalition still fluttered defiantly, though the empire they represented was already in ashes. Reyes studied it through his visor, scanning the defenses. "They'll expect a frontal assault," he said. Kale smirked grimly. "So we won't give them one." The plan was simple and suicidal. While the main force drew the defenders' fire, Reyes and a smaller unit, his veterans and their beasts, would infiltrate the citadel through the old sewage conduits that ran beneath the surface. The passage was radioactive, unshielded, and likely mined, but it was the only way in. The distraction began at dusk. Human artillery and orbital drones opened fire, hammering the citadel's outer walls. The shields blazed under the assault, their glow lighting up the city like a false dawn. Coalition cannons answered, turning the ruins into a sea of plasma. Amid that chaos, Reyes's strike team slipped into the tunnels. The air down there was toxic. Their suits' filters whined as they pushed through waist-deep sludge, moving silently through the dark. Ghost led the way, nose low, navigating the twists and traps that would have killed anything else. Every few meters, they passed the remains of coalition sentries, scouts who had come here before and never made it back. Hours passed in silence until finally the tunnel opened into a vast maintenance bay beneath the citadel. The hum of generators echoed through the metal chambers. Reyes raised a hand, signaling a halt. "Kale, take the left flank. I'll move straight through with Ghost. We find that control core and shut down the shields." Kale nodded and moved out, taking 3 soldiers with him. Reyes advanced with the rest. The first contact came without warning. Coalition troopers emerged from the shadows, plasma rifles blazing. The narrow corridors became a killing ground. Humans and beasts fought side by side, bullets and claws ripping through armor. Ghost lunged at a soldier twice Reyes's size, dragging him down in a blur of teeth and fury. Reyes fired 3 quick bursts into another's chest, then slammed his rifle butt into a third. The fighting was close, brutal, and quick. When it ended, the floor was slick with blood, and the humans were still standing. They pressed deeper into the citadel's heart. Ahead lay the core chamber, a massive circular room bathed in cold blue light. At its center hovered the shield generator, a sphere of energy suspended above a platform of polished steel. Dozens of engineers and soldiers stood around it, scrambling to defend their post. "Ghost," Reyes murmured. The wolf growled low, and then they charged. The battle was chaos again. Explosions tore through consoles as stray rounds hit volatile fuel lines. The humans moved like predators, cutting through the defenders with precision. Reyes reached the generator and planted an EMP charge on its base. "Fall back!" he shouted, slamming his fist on the detonator. The explosion shook the entire citadel. The energy sphere flared once, then imploded, sending a shockwave through the walls. The shield around the citadel flickered and died. Above ground, the human artillery immediately adjusted aim. Without the shield, their bombardment tore into the upper spires, shattering the citadel's walls. Coalition forces scrambled in confusion as the outer defenses collapsed. Reyes and his team regrouped, battered but alive. Kale's voice crackled over the comms. "Shields down, sir. The fleet's firing line is open. We can end this." "Negative," Reyes said. "We're inside. We finish it here." They climbed the spiraling corridors toward the throne chamber, where the coalition's leadership was last reported. Along the way, they passed desperate soldiers, some who dropped their weapons, some who fought to the death. Reyes killed only when he had to. He was tired of killing. Finally, they reached the Great Hall. Massive doors stood before them, carved with the insignia of 1,000 conquered worlds. Reyes pressed his hand to the cold metal and pushed. Inside, the chamber was vast and silent. The remaining leaders of the coalition stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, faces pale with defeat. At their center stood Admiral Kivar, his once pristine uniform torn, his eyes burning with disbelief. "So, he said quietly. "The beasts of Earth have come to claim their prize." Reyes lowered his rifle. "We didn't come for prizes." Kevar's lips twisted. "You've destroyed half the known worlds. You call that mercy?" Reyes took a step forward. "You called us for soldiers. You made this war. We didn't ask for it, but you dragged us into it, and now you're seeing what you asked for." Kevar drew his sidearm, hand shaking. "You're monsters." "No," Reyes said softly. "We're what happens when monsters make the mistake of waking something worse." Kevar fired. The shot hit Reyes's shoulder plate, spinning him slightly. Before the Admiral could fire again, Ghost lunged, knocking the weapon away. The human captain raised his rifle and ended it with a single round. The remaining leaders didn't move. Some fell to their knees, some just stared at the human, realization dawning too late. Reyes lowered his weapon. "It's over," he said. "Surrender and live." No one argued. Outside, the battle finally ceased. Coalition banners fell one by one, and the fire of the bombardments faded into silence. Across Varaxis Prime, humans and beasts stood among the wreckage, staring at the smoke curling into the brightening sky. The war was done. Reyes walked out onto the Citadel balcony, watching dawn break again. Real dawn this time, golden light cutting through the haze. Ghost stood beside him, breathing steady. Kale joined them, limping, his face pale but smiling faintly. "We did it, sir." Reyes nodded. "No, we survived it." They stood there for a long time, saying nothing, as the sun rose over a world forever changed. In the weeks that followed, word spread across the stars. The war was over, the coalition shattered. The galaxy that had once demanded soldiers now faced the consequence of summoning the children of a death world. Worlds that had mocked Earth now sent envoys begging for peace. The name human carried a new meaning. Not just warrior, not just survivor, but something eternal, something unbroken. When the galaxy cried for mercy, the beasts of Earth had answered, not with words, not with vengeance, but with silence. Because mercy, they believed, was not the same as weakness. It was choosing to stop when you still had the strength to destroy. And as the humans departed Varaxis Prime, their ships rising through the pale light, the galaxy watched in awe. For in that silence lay a promise that Earth would fight again if called upon. But for now, the beasts would rest.